Hello and welcome to the Property News Show, where every week we discuss the news and stories that affect landlords and investors in the UK. As always, I'm joined by Mark Comer, founder of Progressive Group, property investor and the host of Mark My Words podcast. You can find everywhere that you need to find and follow him in the links below. Got three very exciting stories for you this week. Firstly, predictions for the growth of the UK property market, including some people that believe it's actually going to shrink. We're talking about the change to EPC ratings and how to make sure as a landlord you do not get fined. And lastly, we're talking about some of the best commuter towns for some of the major cities and the surprising reason why Peterborough is never on those lists. Enjoy the show. We've got three stories today, Mark. Our first one is from the BBC and it's predictions from several experts on whether house prices are going to rise or fall this year. What are your thoughts on this?
I think they'll rise. I think the first half of the year we're still building that head of steam. I think towards the end of 2020 things should be looking up a little bit more. We've got a sort of array of predictions here from a few different types of commentators, but they're all sort of within that 1 to 3% range. I often think that these guys just look at what happened last year and think, oh, is it going to be a little bit better, a little bit worse, and then sort of add a bit on or not. We've got Halifax saying 1 to 3%. I generally think the lenders, Halifax and Nationwide, they're a good source because they've got a lot of empirical data, mortgages completing, they see the trends, they've been there a long time, and this is important. I don't think they've got necessarily a vested interest to overplay it too much, other than they wouldn't want to say house prices are going to drop 20% because they don't want to crash the market, because they don't want to be exposed to a load of loan impairments. So that's quite interesting. RICS are saying 2%. I think their sort of vested interest generally would be, let's not overcook it, let's not expose ourselves to risk from lenders suing them, but I mean, making a prediction like that doesn't expose them. But generally, RICS wouldn't go overboard. They'd be more cautious. That's just their nature and the type of people that would work there generally. Capital Economics 1.5%, maybe, but they've made a lot of sort of weird predictions in the past. Rightmove, the agent's friend, normally Rightmove would offer the highest prediction. They're saying a 2% rise. Rightmove's based on asking prices, so you know they fluctuate a lot more than completion values. Henry Pryor's saying 2% fall. I think he's wrong. I think they'll go up this year.
Why do you think he'd be predicting a fall when, I mean, of all of these, there's about 8 or 9 here. They're all predicting a rise except him. He's saying a 2% fall. What would make someone, other than, I guess, trying to get some attention?
I think it's that.
You think it's that?
I think it's
he just wants to be the contrarian.
He wants to be the outlier.
Just saying something different.
And I'd be tempted to do, if I was really, really honest, I'd be tempted to do something similar myself, while staying in the bounds of saying what I actually think. I think that's why he said that. That's my honest opinion. He's an outlier. It's interesting, and therefore people are going to talk about his prediction versus the others. And he's probably got some reasons for that. Because the others are a bit boring, aren't they? They're all between sort of 1 and 3. And then you've got Zoopla. I don't know. You know, if you look at their portal, I don't have a lot of time for it. You know, the automated valuation model is seriously flawed. Most of the predictions are wrong. Obviously, they market a lot of properties. Interestingly, there's no estate agent on there.
No.
Estate agent would generally, if they're all saying 1 to 3, the agent would say 5%, 10% up, you know, because that's just their sort of mentality.
Yeah, of course.
They want to bring people into the market and sell lots of houses and encourage the market to move on, because generally that gets them more sales and instructions. All quite tight. I'd be at the upper end of those predictions. Look, there are no major reasons why it's going to really sort of gush up right now, because clearly we've still got to sort this trade deal out and Brexit and everything like that. But I just think that the level of certainty and predictability and the trajectory versus last year is so much better. And I do think we've got a nice little period now to sort of get invested. and I think this could build into something really nice. Yeah.
Good. So as mentioned a bit further down, obviously we're starting to see a rebound in the number of first-time buyers.
Yeah.
So the highest amount of first-time buyers for 12 years, which obviously lines up pretty much perfectly with when the last recession happened. Affordability is still a big thing for them. We've got the old Help to Buy scheme.
Yeah.
Do you think there is value in there being? There's nothing announced, but do you think it would be beneficial if the government introduced some new Help to Buy scheme to help stimulate those people entering the market, which then has a knock-on effect for the rest of the market?
Yes. I mean, I think, I don't know how they do it, but I think Help to Buy on existing properties, not just new build, would be a very good thing for the purchasers, because they do tend to pay quite a lot for these new build properties.
Yes.
In exchange for only putting a 5% deposit down. Often they could be paying sort of 15% more than the tradable value.
Yeah, absolutely.
20% more. Now, if it gets people on the ladder and they understand that, then okay, fine. But if they could do it on a sort of existing property, and maybe do a bit of refurb to it, add a bit of value, I think those guys would be in a much better position.
Well, when I bought my house, I chose not to use Help to Buy because I didn't want to buy a new build because I felt they were overpriced.
Yeah.
So I ended up buying something smaller but existing and not using the scheme at all. But if it was available for existing properties, that would help stimulate that market.
And actually, there are a lot of 95% mortgages available now outside of Help to Buy in the 3% interest rate zone. So why wouldn't you try and get one of those first? I do think Help to Buy has brought a lot of first-time buyers into the market. A lot of the landlord tax and regulatory changes have meant that less landlords are taking those properties. So I think that has helped the first-time buyer as well.
So you don't think they compete with the kind of properties landlords?
Well, some of them inevitably do,
Yeah.
because they're at the low end of the starter type units. So I think, more first-time buyers have bought those units and landlords haven't.
Yeah.
So from the government's point of view, that policy, or from this point of view, that policy has succeeded in terms of sort of hammering landlords.
Yeah.
So don't hammer landlords anymore because it's working.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if it continues. Okay, great. So we know then from you'd be on the upper end of this.
Yeah.
Don't have to pick a number, but around that.
Like Henry Pryor, I'll be the outlier. Let's go for 5%.
Oh, are you an estate agent now?
How dare you?
So we've got a second story, which is about changes to the regulation, or rather enforcement of regulation that already exists, and then some predictions on future regulation for the energy efficiency of properties.
Yeah.
So do you want to just talk us through what's happened here and what it means for landlords?
Yeah. So since April 18, any new tenancy, so any property that you would be renting on a new tenancy, needs to achieve an EPC, energy efficiency rating of E or better. And if it doesn't, or you haven't got an EPC, it is an offence. The law's changing to say that it isn't just new tenancies now, it's all tenancies must be, from April 2020, must be an E or better. Landlords are going to have to.
If you've had a long-term tenant who you've had in for 10 years and they're happy, you're happy, and you've not had to do any work to the house, you've got to make sure, get that rating check done, make sure everything is up to date, because you're now going to fall under the ability to be fined or prosecuted for that.
So you need to get an EPC, which I think you needed to get an EPC anyway, but it needs to be E or better now.
Do you think that's going to affect a lot of landlords?
I think it will. I think there's loads of substandard properties still, and I think there's loads of landlords that will just ignore this. But increasingly, when you go to evict a tenant, or when you need to do something like get a mortgage, often lenders are saying, let's see the EPC, or solicitors saying, let's see the EPC. Or if you're trying to evict a tenant, there's more and more of that. So I think they're getting caught more and more by these checks, which from a purely selfish point of view, I quite like it, because we'll go out, we'll comply with all this stuff, and it just winds me up when a load of landlords don't have to, and then we're competing against them.
And everyone gets, and that's when the whole industry gets a bad rep, doesn't it, from a few bad actors.
It's
always been the case.
Yeah, but in addition, we're sort of competing. Their rents.
It's an unfair competition because you're complying when they're not.
Yeah, so it costs us more.
So there are a couple of exemptions that they've talked about. Do you want to just walk us through what these were, which might be able to get you out of it?
Yeah, so I didn't even know about these exemptions, but they seem reasonable. So there is an exemption if the energy efficiency measures, the work that you need to do to the property to get it up to E, a rating of E, would devalue the property by more than 5%. Now, I don't know quite how you determine that. Maybe a surveyor has to determine it. I was sort of thinking, what scenarios would that apply to? And I suspect it may be listed or old buildings.
Yeah.
So if you've got to suddenly put a load of insulation, Covent board in or something like that.
Or replace old windows that, with UPVC. Yeah,
which is obviously the conservation officer is never going to allow and would definitely devalue a property like that. So you can understand why they've introduced that measure. The next one is if a landlord or if a person becomes a landlord recently or suddenly in specified circumstances, a temporary exemption of 6 months will apply, which seems pretty fair actually, because people do suddenly have to move away for work, or maybe they have to rent their property out for other reasons.
Or maybe inherit a property.
Yeah, or they suddenly need money to pay the mortgage, so they have to rent it out. They need a bit of time to upgrade, so that seems reasonable. And then the third one, and I can completely understand this, let's say you've got a leasehold flat, or let's say the mortgage lender prevents you from upgrading the property, you can't get consent, then that would be a superior landlord consent, or the tenant's consent to do it, then you're unable to upgrade it, and that is a valid exemption.
Yeah,
but
totally.
With all these exemptions, lots of people would just crack on, do nothing, and then when the time comes, if they get caught, they go, oh, one of these exemption applies. But actually, if you're wishing to rely on one of these exemptions, you need to register on the private rented sector exemptions register that local authorities can sort of fine people if they're not on there and don't qualify.
Okay. So there's some pretty hefty fines. If you're non-compliant, it can be £5,000 or 10% of the rateable value, which is pretty big, up to a maximum of 50 grand.
Although I haven't seen I can't remember seeing any prosecutions for it. So
how well it's being kind of monitored and enforced.
It's the same old thing, isn't it? If it's down to enforcement.
Lastly on this though, obviously, so they're going for E, obviously enforced by this year in April, but then there's indication they're maybe looking to go to D by 2022, and maybe even C by 2025.
25 or 2030. They haven't set it out, but you can see the trajectory. You can see that's the way it's going.
And there's some pretty significant jumps for a lot of houses. Would you recommend to landlords, if they're going to get some work done, and let's say they're an F now, rather than just scrape an E, would you recommend landlords just jump straight to a C to future-proof yourself, rather than every couple of years having to return and do more work?
I think this is going to a C. I haven't heard any talk of a B, but if 2025, 2030, you're going to need to be C. To me, that's within the next sort of 5 to 10 years. I think if you've got the property empty and you're doing works, it's a very good idea to get it to that level. Clearly, they may go higher after that, but you probably need to do a refurb anyway and go back in at that point, and then the regulations will have changed, and maybe there'll be other things. Gas boilers are going to be banned on new build properties. I think that's within the next 3 years. Clearly, that won't apply to existing properties. So there'll be a lot of changes, and in addition to that, boilers become more efficient. The electric boilers are a lot better now than they were 10 years ago. In fact, the cost of running them are similar or less in comparison to gas. So Yeah, do it now, get it to a C, but I wouldn't push it any further than that. Yeah.
Do you think there's any risk that, there's going to be, say, an amount of houses that are just never going to be able to be Cs, or the cost of making them a C is so expensive, it's not going to be worth it for landlords?
Could be.
And you're going to create a raft of like empty housing because it can't be made a C to be rentable.
Yeah.
And a landlord won't pay for that, but then they can't rent it to anyone, so it sits there. Do you think there's any chance of that happening
they
when
have to
push
move back
things?
in, or they have to sell it?
Yeah.
I think there is that possibility, but in most instances, with windows, insulation, boiler upgrades, maybe loft insulation and sort of boarding, on partition walls and sort of external walls. Generally, they'll be able to get there.
Yeah.
We're just doing a conversion at the moment of an existing building.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all new inside, new services, new boilers, new insulation, but we've managed to get to a B. So it's possible.
All right. And our last story today is from Zoopla, and it's just about, obviously there's the yearly increase in rail fares. This year it's 2.8%.
Yeah.
And they're just talking through the most affordable towns to live in for some of the big commuter areas.
Yeah.
But you made some interesting points about how people should consider these costs versus where they live.
Yeah. So I'll use Peterborough as an example. Peterborough is 45 minutes to London on the train, which is quick. And actually Grays in Essex is 41 minutes to Fenchurch Station, which is pretty similar.
Yeah.
But Grays in Essex, house prices are much higher than Peterborough. And you've got, Bedfordshire, and you've got a lot of those sort of home counties where, the perception is that, the reality is that geographically they're a lot closer to central London. And the perception is that it takes less time to get into London. But reality is somewhere like Peterborough, it may be a similar amount of time, but the big difference is a season ticket from Peterborough may be 8, 9, 10,000, whereas some of these places are a lot less, might be 3 or 4,000. So you have to take that into account. So that then feeds into the differential in house prices, because this article is talking about the cost of the season ticket and the extra cost in mortgage.
Yeah.
Now, clearly this relationship is important. My attitude, if it was purely on economic grounds, would be buy the most expensive house and the cheapest season ticket. Do you see what I mean? Because the money's going into a property which is probably over the long term going to go up 5% in value a year, whereas the money into a season ticket is just dead and gone. But it is quite interesting. Clearly, the value of property also tends to go down as you get further away from London. There just is this sort of rippling out effect and a reduction in value. That relationship with the season ticket is quite interesting, because it isn't totally linear, because then there are a load of other factors that come in, like whether it's a nice area, people want to live there, what amenities are around, Peterborough versus Stamford. Stamford's a lot nicer, and actually takes longer to get into London, so it's not the only thing.
Yeah, okay. Obviously, I guess a lot of people consider kind of bang for their buck when they're purchasing as well. If you've got 300,000 to purchase a house, what you can get for that in Grays is maybe very different from what you can get for that in Peterborough. And I know people that have made their decision based on that as well. You can buy a 2-bed flat in London or a 5-bed house in Peterborough for the sake of the same amount of time on the train, but of course you've got the season ticket to factor in. But a lot of companies in London do subsidise the season ticket or pay for it as part of their benefit, so that is a situation. Anything to mention on any of the other cities that they mention here, especially for like northern areas?
So people working in Manchester could consider Hindley, which is 58 minutes away, seems a bit far.
That's pretty significant.
And combined annual mortgage payments and season ticket costs add up to 6,883. But then what are they earning in Manchester versus somewhere else? I really, if houses are going up or property is going up on average over the long term, around 5% annually, and mortgage interest on your house or flat is about 1.5% to 2%. Now some people say, interest rates might rise. Okay, get a 10-year fix at 2.2.
Yeah.
You could probably achieve now 2.3, something like that. And let's say the maintenance on your property is another 1%. You've got to be at least making 1% to 2% of the value of your property in net terms
every year,
and you're getting to live there for free. And once you put all the utility costs in and insurance and everything like that, let's say you're not making anything, but you get a home effectively for free because you're repaid in the capital growth, the 5%. There's a lot of value, I think, in going and buying them in the most expensive or buying the most expensive property that you can afford in financial terms. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the biggest property.
No.
But, because obviously there'll be more maintenance and people don't necessarily want all that, but certainly moving to a nicer area, if it's for your own home, I think there's a lot of benefit in that. It's actually, for rental properties and for your own, the opposite is true because the yields tend to drop in nicer areas. I don't think there's any more capital growth in nicer areas, but I think you tend to then buy more expensive property and then sort of get more benefit from it. And of course you get to live in a nicer area, maybe you have more compatible neighbours and your kids get to sort of, I don't know, play in
maybe
more green open
nicer
schools and everything like that.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So for everyone at home, just let them know where they can find and follow you online.
So I'm on progressiveproperty.co.uk, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I have my own podcast, Mark My Words.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of this. We do it every week. You can leave your comments below. We love to read what you've got to say, what you think of the stories. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.